We're going to get started now because the Congressman's on a tight schedule. My name is Mark Krikorian. I'm Executive Director of the Center for Immigration Studies, a think tank that examines and critiques the impact of immigration in the United States. In the immediate aftermath of 9/11, a lot of people in the political class were saying that 9/11 was about terrorism, not about immigration. Those are the actual words of, believe it or not, the INS director. The head of the National Council, La Raza, made the same point. The head of the American Immigration Lawyers Association said essentially the same thing, all frankly kind of in a panic that as a result of the attacks that the nation might actually move away from its lax and frivolous approach to immigration law and immigration enforcement. The 9/11 Commission later, and even before that, common sense suggested that in fact our lax and frivolous approach to immigration and border matters did in fact contribute to the attacks. It wasn't so much the cause, but it was an important enabling factor. The center published a report 6 months after the attacks called The Open Door, which is still online, which looked not only at the hijackers, but at the previous decade of attempted and successful terrorist attacks in the United States, starting in '93 with the World Trade Center attack and the attack at the CIA headquarters, and found that vulnerabilities throughout our immigration system, in all different aspects of it, abroad, at the border, and inside the country, had been exploited by various terrorists. Well, one of the people who also understood that was fortuitously the chairman of the Judiciary Committee at the time, Congressman Jim Sensenbrenner, who's joining us, who was instrumental in much of the response related to border and immigration type matters in the years after the attacks. He was author of or sponsor of the USA Patriot Act that had a number of immigration and border control elements to it. The Real ID Act, which sought to raise the floor for state IDs. Since the 19 hijackers, it turns out, had 30 different state-issued identifications that helped them do their jobs. And then the 2005 immigration legislation that passed the House, but not the Senate, because the Senate had passed an amnesty bill. And so the whole point of the panel, and we're going to start off with the Congressman, is to look back 10 years. What worked, what have we done better, what has in fact improved, and what vulnerabilities and holes remain in the immigration and border area with regard to national security. Congressman has to leave in a little while, so he'll talk, take a few questions if he'd like to, and then he'll have to move on, and then we'll continue with the rest of our panel, and I'll introduce them at the time. So, Congressman?
Well, thank you very much, Mark. Right after 9/11, we knew that there were some big problems. They were identified in various types of news conferences and news media investigations, and as a result, the Judiciary Committee that I chaired over the next 4 or 5 years really put together a three-legged stool to help improve our border security. And the reason this was necessary is that we knew that a majority, if not all, of the 9/11 hijackers were either visa overstays or they entered on a visa that had expired, or the purpose for which that they entered was not the purpose for which that the visa had actually been issued. And the three legs of the stool were the Patriot Act, the Visa and Border Security Act of 2002, and the Real ID Act, which was enacted in 2005. And there were a number of things immigration related that were very important in these three areas. One is that the Real ID Act made a requirement that if one was not legally present in the United States, one could not get a U.S. driver's license. If one was legally present on a temporary non-immigrant visa that expired, then the driver's license would expire as of the date of the expiration of the visa. There was a requirement that a chip with personal data be included not only in U.S.-issued passports, but also in passports that were issued by visa waiver countries, so that people could use those passports to enter the United States without a visa, and imposed a visa requirement if the countries of visa waiver eligibility did not issue compliant passports after the date in the Visa and Border Security Act. The states have been going toward compliance with Real ID. And my feeling is that if someone cannot get a valid driver's license, which is used by most of us for ID or as a reader document for other types of IDs, then we would go a long way toward identifying illegal immigrants. And at least if illegal immigrants who decided to drive without a license were pulled over in a traffic stop, if there were outstanding warrants against them or removal orders because they didn't appear when they had their immigration hearing, that would come up on the FBI's computer, which every squad car in the country has got access to. The problem that we've had with these laws has been the implementation of them. Suffice it to say that with the exception of the Patriot Act, both the Bush administration and the Obama administration have been less than eager to comply with the deadlines. As a matter of fact, with the Visa and Border Security Act setting the deadlines for compliant passports, after saying that the deadline ought to be complied with, both to then Homeland Security Secretary Ridge and then Secretary of State Colin Powell, when President Bush came to visit my district for a commencement address at a college that is in my district, rather than driving up in my own car in the motorcade, I received a command subpoena to ride up with the president, where he was lobbying me to give a further extension. And he wanted 2 years. I ended up giving him 1 year, and I told him that that was the last extension that they were going to get. And I finally got the State Department in motion on this. We've seen deadlines being pushed back on the Real ID Act, both by Secretary Chertoff and Secretary Napolitano. She recently chose to delay a compliance deadline to January 15th of 2013, notwithstanding a letter that Chairman King, Chairman Smith, and I sent her earlier this year stating that the compliance deadlines, which had already been extended on Real ID, ought to be complied with. And we're seeing attempts in the Senate to try to zero out the money that was appropriated as a part of, or authorized as a part of Real ID to help the states come into compliance. None of these pieces of legislation will make our country absolutely safe from a terrorist attack or deal with the problem of illegal immigration. But all of them in combination will help deal with the problem of illegal immigration. And I think that a lot of the reluctance on the part of this administration and its predecessors has been because they really don't want to get a handle on illegal immigration. Let me close by making 2 points. One is that approximately 40% of the illegal immigrants in this country are visa overstays, because we don't have a system of checking on whether people who have non-immigrant visas with expiration dates leave the country before their visas expire. And as a result, they become illegal. They become ineligible for any type of employment, even if they had a work-related visa when they entered this country, and a terrorist can go underground. We've made some improvements with the student visa tracking system, which was originally passed in '96 and not implemented prior to 9/11 by the Clinton and Bush administrations. The second thing that we need to do is to come up with full compliance with the Real ID Act. And the third thing we need to do is to have better security on the border because the other 60% of the illegal immigrants enter the United States illegally. And that in and of itself is an offense. It is a crime to illegally enter the United States. It is not a crime to be illegally present in the United States. And as a result, when an immigration judge issues a removal order, and over 95% of the removal orders are default judgments, we need to start enforcing removal orders just as the law enforcement agencies enforce bench warrants of people who blow off traffic tickets, meaning they neither pay the fine or show up in court on the date of the summons that they are handed when they are pulled over. The other thing we need to do, in my opinion, is to finish the fence where the fence can be patrolled. A fence in an area that can't be patrolled is worthless, so we need to go full speed ahead on high tech to figure out who is crossing the border in those places. We have been very lackadaisical in getting that up to speed, even though both the Patriot Act and the Visa and Border Security Act, as well as the Secure Fence Act, require that.